Some men get a phone call that changes everything in a single ring. I got no ring at all for 4 straight days, and that silence took more out of me than any bad news ever could have. You want to know what it does to a man, waiting on a phone that refuses to ring? It turns your kitchen into a courtroom where you're the only one on trial. That was me, 63 years old, standing at my own counter at 3 in the morning, staring at a phone I'd already checked 40 times, half convinced my own daughter was lying somewhere off a highway in Arizona. My name is Frank Delgado. I run Delgado Steel Fabrication out of Toledo, Ohio, a shop that's been bending and welding structural steel for bridges and warehouses since my own father started it with 2 employees and a used torch. I took it over at 28 and built it into something that keeps 60 families fed. I built it with these 2 hands, and I built it so my kids would never have to know the year my father lost the shop the first time, the year we ate government cheese, and I wore my cousin's hand-me-downs to school. Nobody bailed my father out. Nobody was there to catch him. So when my daughter Renee was born, and then my son Marcus, 3 years after her, I made myself a promise standing in that hospital corridor in Toledo. My children would never know that particular kind of scared. I kept that promise for 29 years. And then, on a Monday in early June, that promise turned into the worst 4 days of my life. Welcome back, family, if you've been here before, and welcome in if this is your first time pulling up a chair. Keep one thing in mind as we go. Everybody in this story had 100 chances to do the decent thing. They took every single one of those chances and threw them in the trash. Hit that like button for me, and tell me in the comments what state you're watching from tonight. I read every one of them. It started with a phone call I never got to finish. Renee had asked me 8 months back to co-sign her business loan, a boutique event planning company, she wanted to launch in Scottsdale, chasing all that Arizona money, weddings and corporate galas for tech executives who'd rather write a check than plan their own party. I believed in her. I always had. She had an eye for beautiful things her whole life, ever since she was 9 years old, rearranging the furniture in our living room without asking anybody. So I signed. My name, my credit, my collateral, sitting underneath her dream like a foundation nobody thinks about until the building starts to lean. The bank needed an updated financial statement from her before the quarterly review, some routine paperwork, nothing complicated. I called her Monday morning from my office, half watching one of my welders run a bead down a support beam through the shop window. Straight to voicemail. Fine. She's probably with a client. I left a message. Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Bank needs that updated statement before Thursday. Give me a call when you get a minute. Went back to work. By Tuesday afternoon, nothing. I called again. Voicemail again. Now, here's the thing about Renee. She's never been perfect about picking up. Never has been since she was 16 and got her first phone. But she's never gone a full day without at least a text. Not once in 29 years. So I called Marcus, figuring he'd know if his sister was buried under a big event or something. Maybe some fundraiser gala she was running herself ragged for. Voicemail. Both of them. Same day. I told myself it was nothing. Grown kids get busy. They forget their old man is waiting on something. My wife Loretta noticed it at dinner that night. 31 years married to a woman, and she can read a change in your shoulders before you've even felt it yourself. You've barely touched your chicken, she said, nodding at the plate she'd made from her mother's recipe, the one I usually finish in 10 minutes flat. What's going on with you, Frank? The kids aren't answering, I said. Either one, since yesterday. She waved it off the way wives do when they're trying to talk themselves into calm. They're busy, Frank. They're grown. Renee's probably up to her eyeballs in some wedding. She was right. I knew she was right. So why did my stomach feel like somebody had reached in and turned it inside out? Day 3 is when it stopped being annoying and started being something closer to terror. The bank review was now 2 days out. I called Renee 9 times that day. 9. I called Marcus 6. Every single one died in a voicemail box that I now knew by heart, word for word, down to the little pause before the beep. I stopped eating right. I stopped sleeping at all. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw a car flipped over on some desert highway. I saw 2 Arizona state troopers standing on my porch, hats in their hands, waiting for me to open the door so they could say the words I already knew were coming. I've buried a father before his time, and you learn something ugly about how fast this world takes people. Quiet. Sudden. No warning shot fired first. That night I sat on the edge of the bed at 1 in the morning, phone in my hand, thumb hovering over Renee's name for what felt like the 100th time that week. Loretta sat up behind me. "Frank, come to bed. Something is wrong." "4 days, Loretta," I said, and my voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard from myself since my own father's funeral. Neither one of them. That's not busy. That's not normal for either of my kids. Maybe they're together somewhere. Maybe both their phones died. Both phones? For 4 straight days? I turned and looked at her, and I watched it land on her face too. That same cold drop straight through the floor of the stomach. "Pack a bag," I said. "We're flying out there. Something is wrong. I can feel it in my chest." She didn't argue. That's the thing you learn after 31 years together, which fights are worth having, and which ones you just get up and pack a bag for. We booked the first flight out of Detroit Metro the next morning. I remember standing at that gate, watching the gray Ohio sky give way to blue somewhere over Kansas, thinking this might be the worst decision I ever made in my life. Or it might be the thing that saves both my children. I had no way of knowing which. Loretta held my hand the whole way. Neither of us said much. "What do you say to the woman you love?" "Hope our kids aren't dead" doesn't exactly work as small talk with the flight attendant handing out pretzels. I ran every version of tragedy a father's mind can invent at 31,000 feet, a car wreck on the 101. Renee alone in some office building after hours. Marcus, always the one who drove too fast on that motorcycle he swore he'd sold 2 years back. And none of it, not one single scenario I built in my head, prepared me for what was actually waiting for us on the other side of that door. We landed in Phoenix a little past 1 in the afternoon, and the heat hit us like something with a weight to it, the kind of dry desert heat that a Toledo man never gets fully used to, no matter how many times he visits. I rented a Ford Expedition at the counter, threw our one bag in the back, and pointed us toward Renee's condo in Scottsdale, up near the golf resorts. The whole drive there, Loretta kept saying the same thing on a loop, trying to talk herself into it being nothing. "They're fine, Frank. There's some boring explanation for all this." "Then why won't either of them pick up a phone?" I said, gripping that wheel tighter than I needed to. 4 days, 15 calls between the two of us. Not one text back, not a single one. She went quiet after that. I think some part of her already knew, same as some part of me already knew, that boring wasn't what was waiting on the other side of that building. Renee's building rose up out of the desert like something you'd see in a magazine spread. All glass and pale stucco, palm trees lit up gold against the evening sky. The kind of place that makes a steel man from Toledo feel a little out of his own skin, standing there in a golf shirt among a row of Teslas and one very shiny Range Rover. We rode the elevator up to the 8th floor in dead silence. My hand was actually shaking when I lifted it to knock. 29 years of being her father, and I was standing outside my own daughter's door like a man about to identify a body at the morgue. And that's when I heard it. Music, laughter. Loud and easy and celebratory, the kind of sound you never hear in a hospital hallway. There was a banner taped just inside the frosted glass door, visible through the crack something gold and shiny, letters I couldn't quite make out yet. That's not the sound of a tragedy, I thought. And for half a second relief flooded through me so hard my knees nearly buckled underneath me. Thank God. Thank God they're alive. I knocked. The music dipped low. Footsteps came toward the door. The latch clicked, and it swung open to show me my daughter, Renee, a glass of champagne in one hand, a wide grin frozen halfway between surprise and something a whole lot colder. Something I hadn't seen on her face since she was 14 years old and got caught sneaking back in past her curfew. That grin didn't stay confused for long. It curdled into something else entirely, and in that half a second before she opened her mouth, some part of me, the part that had spent 4 sleepless nights terrified his daughter, was hurt somewhere in a ditch, already knew the truth of it. I hadn't flown 2,000 miles to rescue my children from some tragedy. I had flown 2,000 miles straight into an ambush I never once saw coming. "What are you two doing here?" Not Dad. Not Mom. Not even "is everything all right?" "What are you two doing here?" Like Loretta and I were a couple of solicitors she'd have to figure out how to get rid of at her own front door. I tried to keep my voice steady, though my whole chest felt like it was folding in on itself brick by brick. "I've been calling you both for 4 days," I said. "You didn't answer, either one of you. I thought something had happened to you." Loretta pushed past me a step, both hands flying up to cover her mouth, and for one single second, I watched 31 years of motherhood pour out of her all at once. "Oh, thank God," she gasped. "Baby, you're okay. We've been calling for 4 days straight. We were sick, Renee. Sick with worry." Renee cut her off before she'd even finished the sentence. She rolled her eyes, not a small roll either. A full, dramatic, exhausted roll. The kind children give you when you've asked them for the third time to take out the trash. "We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you," she said, and her voice came out flat and sharp and final. "Stop calling us, Dad. We have our own lives now. You're smothering us. Just stay out of it." 4 words. I've taken a lot of hits in my 63 years. A steel beam once caught me across the shoulder and put me in a sling for 6 weeks. My own father's absence the last 11 years of his life while he chased work 3 states away. None of it landed the way those 4 words landed, standing in that hallway outside my own daughter's front door. I stood there with that banner glinting gold through the glass behind her head, like the whole building was mocking me quietly, and I genuinely had no idea what to say back to her. 29 years. Every soccer game. Every skinned knee. Every 2 a.m. fever I sat up through. And this was the return on all of it. Before I could find my words, a man stepped up beside her, tall, tanned, holding 2 champagne flutes like he owned the whole building. His whole posture radiating a kind of smug ease I'd only ever seen on men who'd never once had to work with their hands. "Babe," he said, looking us up and down, "who are these people?" Loretta blinked at him, completely lost. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Renee's smile came back, thin and cold. She raised her left hand, slow, deliberate, like she was presenting evidence in a trial. A ring caught the hallway light and threw it right back into our faces. "This is Chase," she said, "my fiancé, and this is our engagement party, which the two of you are currently ruining by showing up uninvited." Uninvited. Ruining. I heard those words land, but for a second they didn't fully register, like my brain refused delivery on a package it already knew would hurt too much to open. Our daughter, engaged, and we found out standing in a hallway being told we were the problem. 31 years of marriage, and I had never once seen Loretta's face do what it did in that moment, like somebody had reached bare-handed straight into her chest. Because sitting back home in our fireproof safe was her own mother's wedding band. 22 years she'd kept that thing polished and wrapped in tissue paper, dreaming about the day she'd hand it over to whoever Renee chose to marry, or to Marcus's bride someday. And instead here she was, standing in a hallway in Scottsdale, being treated like an intruder at a party celebrating a ring that had nothing to do with her at all. I want to stop right here, because this is the part where people who've never lived through it would say, "Frank, just walk away. Don't make a scene." And, believe me, some part of me was already halfway back down that elevator in my mind. But another part of me, the part that had flown 2,000 miles, because he genuinely believed his children were in danger somewhere, that part needed to understand. How does a daughter go from, "he's calling because he loves us," all the way to "he's smothering us," with no conversation in between at all? Marcus appeared in the doorway right about then, holding a tray of what smelled like carne asada and grilled shrimp, and he groaned the second he laid eyes on us. Actually groaned, like we were an errand he thought he'd already crossed off his list. "Are you serious right now?" He set that tray down hard enough to rattle every plate on it. "You guys couldn't just let us have one night, could you?" I felt something steady itself inside me right then. The fear I'd been carrying for 4 straight days was turning into something else entirely. I don't know that it was anger yet. Maybe it was just clarity, finally arriving. "Son," I said, keeping my voice level, "I didn't come here to ruin anything. The bank needed an updated statement from your sister before Thursday's review, and because I'm the one backing that loan, I needed to confirm a detail before I signed off on it. I called her. Then I called you. Neither one of you answered for 4 days." Marcus let out a laugh, short and mocking, the kind of laugh that carries no actual humor in it at all, just contempt wearing humor's jacket for the occasion. "Oh, here we go. The rescue mission." He shook his head slow, like he was talking down to a child instead of the man who'd co-signed his sister's business loan and paid off his last 2 speeding tickets. You think because you signed a piece of paper you get to track our every move for the rest of our lives? This is exactly why Renee moved out here in the first place. To get away from you hovering over every little thing. 2,000 miles, on purpose, to get away from me. I flew 2,000 miles because I loved my children too much to sit still and wait it out. They'd moved 2,000 miles because they loved me too little to stay close enough for me to reach them. Renee nodded along, like her brother had just delivered some kind of closing argument, then leaned against her own doorframe, arms crossed, ring catching the light again. Exactly, she said. You always use money to keep tabs on us, Dad. To feel important. I run my own company now. I don't need you hovering over me acting like some kind of hero. She paused. And here's the part that really cracked something open in my chest. We saw your calls coming in. We ignored them on purpose. We wanted to see how long it would actually take you to get the hint and stay out of it. On purpose. Not we were slammed with clients. Not our phones both died. On purpose. For 4 days straight I had sat awake picturing every possible danger my children could be in, and the entire time my own children were sitting somewhere, watching my name light up their screens, and choosing, deliberately, to let their own father suffer through it, just to teach him a lesson he never asked to be taught. Chase tossed his hair back, clearly bored by the whole exchange by then. Yeah, he said, we're trying to celebrate our future here with people who actually matter tonight. We don't need this old-fashioned drama at our party. He gestured down the hall toward the elevator, like he was shooing off a delivery driver who'd knocked on the wrong door. Please, just go. Please, go. In my own daughter's doorway. From a man I'd met 90 seconds earlier in my whole life. I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for everything that comes after this moment. I didn't raise my voice. I've turned that over in my head plenty of times since whether I should have. Whether some part of them needed to see me break the way they'd just broken their mother right there in that hallway. But that's not who I am, and it never has been. My own father wasn't around long enough to teach me how to handle a moment like that one, so I had to work it out on my own, standing right there under that banner bobbing gently behind my daughter's head like some cruel decoration mocking the whole thing. I looked at the 2 children I had poured my entire life into, the 2 kids I'd sworn to protect the very moment I first held each of them, because I knew exactly what it felt like to grow up without somebody protecting you the way you deserved. They stood there in a lifestyle my signature and my credit had helped build underneath them, the condo, the loan, every safety net stretched out beneath their feet, and they were completely blind to every inch of it, treating their own mother like something to be swept off a doorstep. I didn't argue with either one of them. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached over, took my sobbing wife gently by the hand, and turned us both toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Chase mutter something low to Renee. I didn't catch the words, and honestly, I didn't need to. The tone said plenty all on its own. They wanted to be left alone, and by this time tomorrow, they were going to get exactly what they'd asked me for. If you've been with me a while now, drop your thoughts down in the comments below, and hit that like button while you're at it. I read every single one, and I mean that. The elevator ride down felt longer than the whole flight in from Detroit. Loretta stood beside me, staring straight at the mirrored doors, tears running steady down her face without a single sound coming out of her. I've watched my wife cry plenty of times across 31 years at her own father's funeral, at both kids' graduations, once during some insurance commercial I still tease her about to this day. But I had never once watched her cry like that. Silent, hollow, like something inside of her had simply stopped turning over. We didn't talk in the lobby. We didn't talk in that expedition on the drive to the airport, even though I kept glancing over, waiting for her to say anything at all, just so I'd know she was still in there with me. She finally spoke somewhere around the airport exit, staring out at the desert like it might hand her back an answer. 22 years, she said quietly. I kept that ring polished for 22 years, Frank. I didn't ask which ring. I already knew. I used to picture the day I'd hand it over to her, she went on, her voice cracking clean down the middle, or to whoever Marcus chose someday. I imagined telling her the whole story behind it, how my mother wore it through 2 moves and a fire that took half our house. I imagined I don't even know what I imagined anymore. Not that. Not being told I was ruining a party I didn't even know existed. What do you say to a thing like that? What is there to even offer? I reached over and took her hand off her lap and held it the rest of the way, and neither one of us said another word until we were sitting at that gate waiting to board. The flight home was the quietest 2 hours I've lived through, and I've sat through plenty of quiet ones. Loretta stared out that window the whole way, watching Arizona shrink and vanish beneath the clouds, tears slipping down every few minutes like her body had simply given up trying to hold them back anymore. I held her hand and said nothing at all. What was there to say? It'll be fine. It wasn't fine. They didn't mean it. They'd told us themselves, plainly, that they planned it, that they watched the calls roll in and chose silence to make a point. They're just going through something? 29 and 26 years old is not a phase. That's a grown woman's decision, made in full daylight, with her fiancé egging her on the whole time. I just held her hand and let the silence say what neither one of us had the strength to say out loud yet. Somewhere over New Mexico, staring at the seatback in front of me, something shifted inside my chest, quiet but permanent, like a door closing somewhere deep in a house you thought you knew every room of. I gave my children everything I never had growing up, every game, every skinned knee, every ounce of protection a boy without a father around spends his whole life dreaming of giving his own kids someday. And somehow, in giving them all of that, I'd raised two people who looked at me like I was the villain standing in their story. By the time we touched down back in Toledo, something in me had already made a decision, even though I didn't have words for it just yet. I just knew the man walking off that plane wasn't the same one who'd boarded it terrified for his children's lives a few hours earlier. That man was gone, and whatever was left of him was about to make a phone call his children would remember for the rest of their natural lives. They wanted to be left on their own, so I decided to leave them on their own, legally, financially, completely. And by the time either one of them figured out what that actually meant, it was already too late to undo a single piece of it. You know what nobody warns you about heartbreak? It doesn't announce itself the second it happens. It waits. It lets you walk through your own front door first, lets you set your bags down, lets you believe, for one merciful second, that maybe the worst of it is already behind you. And then it takes your wife's legs clean out from under her. We walked into our house outside Toledo a little after 10 that night, and the quiet hit us differently than it ever had before. 31 years in that house, countless nights coming home from softball games and school plays and every ordinary moment that used to fill those rooms with noise. That night the silence had teeth in it. Loretta made it maybe 3 steps past the front hall before her knees just gave out from under her. She went down onto the living room floor, right there on the rug her mother had given us as a wedding gift, and she cried the way you cry when somebody has died. Not the composed, careful crying you do standing in a hallway in front of strangers. The real thing. The kind that comes up from somewhere underneath your ribs. I stood there a second just watching her, and something in my own chest cracked wide open. 31 years of marriage, and I had never once felt this helpless in my whole life. I got down on that floor with her, didn't say a single smart thing, didn't try to fix a thing, which, if you know me at all, is something close to a miracle, because fixing things is the only language I've ever really known how to speak fluently. I just held her while she cried into my shoulder, and I let myself finally ask the question that had been chasing me the whole flight home. Where did we go wrong, Loretta? I gave them everything I never had growing up. She lifted her head, eyes red and swollen, and said the only thing that made any sense to me that whole night. No, Frank, you didn't turn them into anything. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. They did that themselves. You just handed them a life they never once had to work for. And people who never have to work for something never learn to be grateful for it either. I held my wife on that floor until almost midnight, and somewhere in there I made myself a quiet promise. The only person who had stood beside me through every version of my life, good, bad, terrified, worn down to nothing, was lying right there in my arms. My children had their own lives now. They'd made that painfully clear to both of us. So I decided right then that I was going to honor that wish, and spend whatever time I had left loving the one person who had actually earned every bit of it. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked, really talked, the kind of conversation 31 years of marriage lets you have without needing to explain half of it out loud. We agreed on one thing above everything else, whatever came next, we'd move on it together. No solo decisions. No guilt trips down memory lane that would soften either one of us at the wrong moment. By sunrise, we were aligned. And a man like me, aligned with his wife, is not somebody you want standing between you and a telephone. I called my attorney, Walter Reyes, at exactly 8 in the morning. He picked up on the second ring. Man's handled Delgado Steel's contracts for almost 20 years now. He knows the difference between when I'm calling about business and when I'm calling about something else entirely. This was clearly something else. "Frank," he said, "you sound like a man who didn't sleep a wink." "I need you to pull my name off Renee's loan guarantee," I said, "today before the review closes out." There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when he wants to make sure you're not about to do something you'll be regretting by lunchtime. "You're sure about that?" "Once that guarantee comes off, the bank's going to flag the account automatically. No warning period on a loan that size." "I've never been more sure of a single thing," I said. Walter didn't push back any further. By 10 that morning, the withdrawal was filed. By 2 in the afternoon, it was processed clean through. The quarterly review came and went at midnight with no signature attached to it, because for the first time in 8 months, there was no Frank Delgado standing behind that loan like a steel beam nobody ever bothers to thank. They wanted to prove they didn't need me hovering over their lives. I decided to hand them the closest thing to proof a man in my position could actually offer. I didn't hear one word for 3 full days, which frankly felt almost funny given everything that had just happened between us. The same silence that had nearly broken me a week earlier now felt like the most peaceful 3 days I'd had in months. The call came on a Friday afternoon. I was in my office, going over a supply order for a bridge job out near Columbus, when my phone buzzed with Renee's name lighting up the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Dad." Her voice came out tight and clipped, the sound of a woman trying hard to sound calm and failing at it completely. "There's some kind of mistake with the loan. The bank says my line got frozen because there's no guarantor on file anymore. They're calling in the balance in full within 30 days or they're pulling my equipment lease." "There's no mistake, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice level, almost gentle. "I withdrew as guarantor 3 days ago." Dead silence on the line. "You what?" "Dad, why would you do that? You know I can't qualify for that kind of credit on my own yet. If they call this loan in, it's going to wreck my business before it ever really gets off the ground." "You told me to stay out of it," I said. "So I am." "Dad, please, you have to call them back. Tell them it was some kind of mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, Renee. I'll talk to you soon." I hung up. She and Chase didn't wait around for the bank to force the issue. They couldn't afford to let a defaulted business loan sit on her record while she was trying to build a client list. The actual unwinding happened fast and quiet and entirely procedural. I heard the details later, secondhand, through an old family friend who still lived out that way. Renee spent 3 straight days on the phone with vendors, canceling contracts, refunding deposits on 2 weddings she couldn't cover the equipment for anymore. Chase, it turned out, wasn't in any position to help cover the gap either, not with the kind of debt he was already carrying quietly on his own. There's a strange, quiet clarity in watching natural consequences finally arrive at a door that's been propped open by your own signature for far too long. Because here's the thing nobody ever tells you about being a fixer your whole life: the moment you stop fixing, the world doesn't come crashing down. It just becomes honest again, maybe for the first time in years. I didn't stop there either. Over the following 2 weeks, I looked at every other financial thread, still tying my name to theirs. You can't just cross your name off a co-signed loan with a pen and a signature, but you can absolutely force the bank's hand on it. I called our account manager about the equipment lease that Marcus had running through my company's line of credit for his little landscaping side business, and I officially revoked the collateral backing it. The lender froze the draw within the week and demanded he find new security inside 30 days or return the equipment outright. Next, I called the dealership holding the note on Marcus's truck, the one I'd co-signed 2 years back when his own credit wasn't strong enough on its own. I informed them in writing that as co-signer, I was refusing to cover any future missed payments going forward. Since Marcus's credit alone was already shaky, the bank flagged the loan as high risk and demanded an immediate restructure with a much higher rate attached. I didn't do any of it out of anger. I just let the banks and the lenders do exactly what they do best, look at my children's actual standing on their own, without my shadow covering every inch of it for them. They showed up on our porch almost a month later. They didn't have much of a choice left. Scottsdale had chewed them both up and spit them right back out the second my name came off every piece of paper holding their lives together. Renee's business folded within 3 weeks without that credit line behind it. Marcus lost the truck to repossession inside of 6. With no way to cover the rent on that condo without Renee's income holding steady, the two of them packed what fit into a rented box truck and drove 22 hours straight back to Ohio to survive the winter. They didn't call first. They just pulled that truck right up to our curb outside Toledo, looking like two ghosts of the successful young people they'd believed themselves to be 3 months earlier. Marcus was the one doing the knocking, hard and fast, his face pale and furious, pounding on that door like it owed him some kind of apology. I opened it, let them both in, sat them down in the living room, the same room where Loretta had collapsed onto the floor weeks before, and let them say whatever they'd driven 22 hours straight to come say to me. Renee went first, and she was crying before she'd even gotten through the doorway. Real tears this time, not the performance kind. Though it took me a minute standing there to remember that real tears don't automatically add up to real accountability on their own. How could you do this to us? Her voice broke on every other word. We're your family, Dad. You're destroying everything we built over some small argument, and you know I still owe money on canceled contracts. Small argument? I asked, and my voice came out entirely empty of any feeling at all. You watched your mother and me call you both for 4 days straight while we were sick with worry, Renee. You ignored us on purpose to teach me some kind of lesson. Now the world's out here teaching you one of its own. Renee's face shifted then, grief curdling fast into something uglier, something closer to a desperate panic. You're just a control freak who can't stand watching us succeed without you, she said, her voice climbing, echoing off the hardwood floor. You've always been like this. This is some sick revenge plot because we didn't invite you to one party. I didn't flinch. I don't want to see either of you fail, sweetheart. But you told me you didn't need me hovering over you acting like some kind of hero. I'm just honoring the wish you handed me yourself. If you truly don't need me, then you don't need my name on your loan, and your brother doesn't need my collateral backing his equipment. That's not revenge. That's just what adulthood actually looks like. Renee's jaw went tight. I watched her search for another angle, the way a man pats down his pockets for keys he already knows aren't sitting there. Mom would never have let you do this, she said, desperate now, pivoting hard. You're doing this behind her back, aren't you? Punishing us because you're bitter about a party. That's when Loretta stepped into the room from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, voice steadier than I'd heard it since that hallway in Scottsdale. Your father and I are on the exact same page, she said, firm and solid, not a single crack running through it. We talked this through together. We both agreed to honor the wish the two of you handed us. Marcus, who'd stayed quiet up to that point, finally cracked wide open. Mom, you can't be serious right now. I stood up from my chair, walked over, and put my hand gently on Loretta's shoulder. So here we are, I said. We're leaving the both of you alone. Good luck out there. I watched something in each of their faces finally understand it, really understand it, that this wasn't a phase, wasn't a bluff, wasn't some father who'd cave the second his kids cried hard enough sitting in his own living room. I listened to them cry and lay the blame on me for their own mess. They tried to make me feel guilty for the canceled contracts, for the repossessed truck, for every single choice they themselves had made along the way, but I felt nothing except clarity, clean and total. These were the same two people who'd stood in a doorway and told me I was smothering them. The same two who'd broken their own mother's heart without so much as a flinch to show for it. They didn't want my help when I was offering it freely. They only wanted somebody to blame once they realized they couldn't manage alone. They left that night without another word between us. I heard the truck door slam outside, heard the engine fade off down the street, and Loretta and I stood in that living room in a silence that, for the first time in weeks, didn't feel anything like grief. It felt like peace, plain and simple. I went to see Walter again the following week, and this time it had nothing to do with any loan. I want to rewrite the trust, I told him, sliding my coffee aside to make room for the folder he'd brought along, Completely, top to bottom. He looked up at me over his glasses, the same careful look he'd given me the day I pulled Renee's guarantee off that first loan. How completely are we talking? If I go first, everything goes to Loretta. If she goes first, it comes back to me. And if we're both gone, I paused, and for the first time in weeks I felt something settle in my chest instead of tearing straight through it. Not $1 goes to the kids. Instead, it funds trade apprenticeships for kids aging out of foster care. Kids who never had a father standing behind them for anything, let alone a loan or a lease. Kids who'd give almost anything just to have somebody call and actually mean it. That's where every dollar goes. Walter didn't ask me to reconsider a single word of it. He just nodded, made his note, and got to work drafting it up. My own father lost everything once, and had nobody standing behind him to catch the fall. I grew up watching that, and I swore my own children would never know that particular kind of empty. And somehow, in giving them everything I never had, I raised two kids who took a father who loved them completely for granted. My kids don't need my money. They made that abundantly clear to me in a hallway in Scottsdale. But there are kids out there right now, real kids, sleeping in group homes and foster placements tonight, who would trade almost anything just to have one man believe in them the way I once believed in mine. My legacy isn't going to the two who pushed their own mother out of a doorway. It's going to the kids who'd actually give anything to have a father worth calling. Months passed after all of that. The calls from Renee and Marcus slowed down, and then they stopped coming altogether. I heard through an old friend that the two of them had moved into a smaller rental together, somewhere outside Columbus, splitting the bills to make it work. No more desert views, no more Range Rover parked out front. Struggling, from what I understood. Learning the hard way what a monthly budget actually looks like when your name isn't riding on the back of somebody else's signature anymore. I won't sit here and tell you it doesn't sting to hear that. It does. Some nights, it still does. Plenty. But every time that ache creeps back in on me, I remember that hallway. I remember stay out of it. I remember watching my wife's face come apart over a ring that never got its moment the way she'd dreamed it would. And the ache settles right back down where it belongs. Loretta and I sit out on our back porch most evenings now, right around sunset, coffee in hand, watching the sky do its slow fade out over the same backyard where two kids once learned to ride bikes. I stayed up half the night putting together myself. She reached over one evening not too long ago and put her hand over mine, the way she's done 1,000 times across 31 years, and I looked at her and understood something simple and true all at once. My father lost everything once, and I spent my whole life trying to be the man who never let that happen to his own family. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only person I truly needed to protect this whole time was the woman sitting right there beside me. My kids have their own lives now. They made that crystal clear to me standing in a doorway in Scottsdale. And my wife and I, we have each other. And it turns out, family, that's more than enough for the both of us. If this one meant something to you tonight, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments where you're watching from. I'll see you on the next one.